Laro na mo manok, ayaw kaulaw. Dayon.
Unsay tripping ni Kate Deligero. Director of Iskalawag's Lily, A Short History of a Few Bad Things, and Cordero sa Diyos, Keith Deligero is a notable regional filmmaker from Cebu City. I recall him saying, regional cinema is universal cinema. And as a regional filmmaker myself, it pleases me to make this video essay. This is a very informal video essay, by the way. Honestly, yaw-yaw ra bitaw ako sa shorts ni Keith Deligero. He had a great deal of film-related work in the Philippines. His short film started in 2006. He made a documentary short, Pitsenyor Kang Inday Kini. This was followed by Ako Ang Daigdig, Art Sign Jesus, One Init Pista sa Langit, May na lang ni Kaysa sa Magdrugs, Gumamela, Babylon, Kalayo, and Days of the New. These are just his shorts. Daganig spoilers, so tanaw mo sa iyong mga salida. With what I've seen in his shorts, Deligero displays an in-depth, organic Cebuano familiarity with pinches of experimental texture. With familiarity, I mean the little chuckles we make when we see the almost aloof, awkward, funny, and essentially very true-to-life occurrences. This is the Keith Deligero film experience guarantee. So for his case, his nonlinear editing gets mastered film after film. May na lang ni Kaysa sa Magdrugs and Days of the New are perhaps the only narrative shorts Deligero created as linear, more or less. We'll get back to that later. I think One Init Pista sa Langit is his best non-linear short. The non-linearness was the filmic needle that stitched the narrative all together. Perhaps that's my only argument why Babylon lacked in terms of chronology. Gumamela is perhaps his only work I deeply struggle to get a grasp on. It is a question mark. And the question before the mark is this as complex as I think it could be, or is this a simple visualization of the film's context? Perhaps I'm overthinking about it. Deligero did mention that it was originally an installation piece supposedly played on loop. That only gave me more questions. But perhaps formulating more questions is the answer. I think my cinematic experience towards this piece reflects a similar feeling with his adjacent feature films like A Short History of a Few Bad Things. My throat is dry. I need to lubricate. ASMR. Pitsenyor Kang Inday Kini and Art Sign Jesus are perhaps his most upfront observation on a post-colonized and imperialist society. The usage of Tagalog in his interviews for Art Sign Jesus, the display of Philippine tourism in both said films, and religion provides the Cebuano narrative as is. Deligero provides raw experiences that it leaves the commentary for the spectator to create their own. Kalayo and Ako Ang Daigdig solely reminds me of Kevin de la Cruz's poetic energy. The two shorts humble a spectator through this poetic approach. Ako Ang Daigdig subjects the masses of all ages in public spaces, and he even puts himself subtly into those spaces. With the digital camera in use, he supplemented flares of different colors that gives out this film aesthetic. There is a feeling of being lost in time in Daigdig, despite the awareness of the tangible present. I think Kalayo is a remarkable reflection of oneself amidst pandemic. Deligero's display of inmate t-shirt is a tasteful detail to suggest imprisonment being in the Duterte regime, figuratively and literally. The suggested ability to see through the conditions outside his environment formulates the arc for his character. This is perhaps his most criticizing socio-political short. Duterte's infused shallow poetry is paired with grave and serious shots. Kalayo's dominated use of drone shots give this very alienating and hopeless feeling. Babylon is the epitome of Deligero shorts so far. It checked the boxes of nonlinear storytelling, borderline magical realism, chef's kiss, playful language translation, and frankly, he hasn't lost his touch on experimental approaches. As an example of wordplay, these scenes give out double meaning. He also hasn't lost his touch on his poetic side. His usage of karaoke machine as a time machine is a humorous and poetic choice as a prop. In the latter sequence of the film, two female characters perform some sort of chant. And from my understanding, these are the lines to perhaps heal the injured male character, but also to teleport. Going back to Days of the New, granted that its editing isn't strictly nonlinear, it did bring up the question of time frame. Through dialogue, it questioned the reality of the passing of the time and everything else that seemed peculiar. This wasn't the first time Keith Deligero played with the concept of time. And frankly, this shift of time frame innovation in his works show his progression throughout his filmography. Perhaps his most arguable regional experience is the mentioning of the Black Dahlia murder in 1947. Arguably a regional experience because it's not strictly as a one experience, but the factor wherein as Filipinos, we have this trait to find or even create a Western equivalent of our experiences. Not necessarily to always feel validated as to how white privilege includes being instantly corroborated. Anyway, the mentioning of the Dahlia murder is arguably the most regional experience because this speaks in volume about the colonial mentality us as Filipinos from the regions still attain. This short film is a mind twister in its most subtle form. Deligero retained his style in leaving it to the spectators to formulate the commentary, or for this case, the answer. The repeated question is, who is the serial killer? Is the killer the suspected influencer? Is the killer not even human? Or has it been the same character we've been looking at for most of the film's screen time? I've realized that this is an example of how today's filmmaking is heavily affected and always go down to a white man's doing. But does that mean being regional makes us intolerant to native resistance? The
I
way
think
we
it started
subconsciously
about
act with colonial
I around
mentality creates this line between treating it as our birthmark and treating it as a scar. In a lot of discussions that regard regional cinema, it often include the sentiment wherein only a specific humor or context in a certain ethnic group could be understood. De Lejero succeeds in creating a bridge beyond the lost in translation river. His films are fundamentally independent and has this lovely touch of an underground influence. Considering his beginnings were from the Kinaboy approach, De Lejero's shorts went far across the world. Despite his works going as far as the other side of the world, he remains honest with his artistic expression, leaving us a regional cinematic experience. I believe it will go as far as where our roots grew.